Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Zero Sum podcast. I'm Aaron Moog. I am very excited today to have Diana Kelley on the podcast. So thanks for being here. Appreciate you having here. We're it's very exciting for me because one of the side reasons I had started this podcast was to meet people I hadn't met before. So we had never really met. Maybe we've been in the same room, but we don't really know each other. So that's very exciting. I think you have an incredibly interesting career background. Where you fit in the cyber landscape is very, very cool. So we're going to talk about all that.
Thank you.
But first of all, thank you for being here. It's so great to
For
have you.
sure. And yeah,
Oh,
happy to be here. Thanks for the invite. And we do have a very good mutual friend, Mike
yeah.
McKenna,
So
who is our
that's
bridge.
that's the bridge to make sure I know I'm not going to do anything too stupid. So, you know, from a bio perspective, right? You've had a really interesting career, and I think you started and sort of the big company side of things, the Microsofts, the IBMs, and sort of made your way into startup world, which we can talk about. But I love kind of where you're at, and then sort of nexus of VC funded startups and AI career and women in security, and then kind of where it all blends. So I guess I'll kind of start here, and maybe we can unwrap and unpack whatever you're interested in talking about. But as somebody who's been in the industry for a while, like, kind of where do you think we're at? Are you happy, nervous, upset? Like just as an industry, obviously there's a lot
Mm.
of AI confusion. Like, kind of how are you feeling about it right now?
But that's a big question. And actually, my resume kind of goes back because I've been in doing it for so long. It actually goes back one of my first I had a job where I actually developed software for a small company, a logistics company in Boston years and years ago. And then I was the head for we had been a startup, but it had IPO'd already, Dataware Technologies, and I ended up being their head of um systems administration, I think they called it. But basically I was the CIO and the CISO for this company with 9 offices around the globe. So it's interesting, because I went from smaller companies to big companies and then back to the startup world. So I've been doing this a really long time, almost 4 decades. What do I think? I think we're in two things. One is this is one of the biggest inflection points in technology I think that we've seen in my career, because I got into this career because of the internet. I had used the DARPANET in the 1970s. I really felt like this was going to change how people did things, did work,
Good call.
in yeah,
Great call.
yeah.
You
If
called
only
that
I
one.
had been able to invest that knowledge,
Right. Yeah.
in
Oops.
in a stock or something,
Right. Right. Yeah. Buy Apple
right,
at
but
$7.
right,
Yeah.
and if I'd had the money at the time, since I was
Hmm.
a kid, basically, so I knew that was going to be very different. That was going to change things, and as we know, um, and then, we had Wi-Fi and we had the cloud, and I've heard people say, like, we obviously we went from sort of traditional SDLC to secure SDLC and DevSecOps. There have been huge changes within the technology and how we use technology, but I don't think there's been anything quite as big as internet until AI. Part of the answer is I don't know, because this is just so big and different that we're going to have to figure out how to use this technology and how we're going to, initially when people were looking at Gopher sites and HTML, I don't think that they thought Amazon or even thought, although Jeff Bezos did. So yeah, Jeff, but yeah, I don't think people thought, even like the other day, I was trying to get a visa to go to Australia. And to get the visa, I needed a mobile app. And I'm not sure that there was no other way to do it other than go to, I think, in person to an embassy. So, I don't think that when we first saw HTML and being able to like hyperlink, people were like, we were going to get where we are. And I think that AI is going to be like that too. There are going to be applications of it. And I don't mean nobody's going to have a job, because I do not believe that. But I do think that how we use AI and how it transforms us is still obviously in the making. So there's that, which is like, I don't know. If anybody knows, I'd love to know, because then maybe I could finally get the investment in the stock that I didn't get when but
Yeah.
no,
There you go. Call it this time. Yeah.
The other thing is, I think back to I was at the SC Security Awards a few years ago. I don't know. Have you ever been to that? There was like, I don't know if they still do it. It was like this like sort of black tie. Everybody sat at big round tables, and there were awards given out. And a comedian came up and was talking about, because he was the MC. He was talking about all the breaches that year. And then he's like, wait a second, why are we giving you guys awards?
It's a good question.
Um, so I think with our industry, we've had sort of ebbs and flows of how well we're doing. We're always getting a huge amount of influx. We never have quite the resources. And I think that right now, one thing with AI is that there's going to be more executive eyes or awareness of the security legacy debt that almost all of us in operational seats have been dealing with for a long time. So I think that so how are we doing? We know that we're not doing as well as we'd like to, in part because we've never really gotten the resources that we needed. And I do wonder if I kind of hope that there's going to be a little bit more attention paid to that, and maybe more, clarity on why we really do need to take care of some of the stuff that isn't like the coolest, but it's like good old hygiene, because that's where some of these exposures are coming with AI aids.
Yeah, it's probably been the part of my career, and I've been doing this a long time too, of just the most, uh, the least powerful I've ever felt in security, in the sense of like how fast the world's going and how we have so little control over it. Like I call it the era of sort of YOLO security, right? Of just like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm going to throw my spreadsheets in Claude and there's nothing you can do about it. Like I'm doing this. And it's like, feels very powerless. And obviously there's a whole generation of companies coming up that are trying to address that. But like in traditional like ideation of security, I feel like we're relatively powerless. And at the same time, it's beating up our industry. It's causing layoffs, supposedly. It's all these things that are creating a lot of fear. And so I don't really know what the future of this looks like. But I also think we can't keep doing it the way we've been doing it, right? Because that wasn't even that effective in the era of sort of SaaS and traditional IT.
Right.
Like I was having a conversation over the weekend with somebody over text, and it was like, um, when everybody thinks they can build an app, we're screwed. Like we'll never keep up with that. It's too many people create too many dumb things at a scale, and it's like, how am I going to stay ahead of all this? So it's very like I think fear driven for a lot of people, but also part of me is like it's also the greatest opportunity of our careers to rethink things, right? Um,
It
you
is.
know, uh, and I'm sure that's what you're working on day to day, and I'd love to talk to you about that. But it's the most divisive in the sense of like the opportunity is unbelievable to build a startup, to great funding. But also you read, I don't know, 4,000 people got laid off from Microsoft or whatever. It's like, how do these two things go together in any meaningful way? So in your day to day, obviously you're talking to a lot of people about AI. Where do you
Yeah.
think that part's at? Like the adoption curve of it, are we sort of in the beginnings, trough of disillusionment, like at the peak? Like how do you feel like customers and regular people are at with?
I feel like sometimes, they say like the horse is out of the barn, and, security, we're always like going after that. I feel like this has been a bullet train in terms of adoption. There's just been there were a lot of headlines that said, everything from it's going to increase productivity and increase your ROI to you can fire you've got 100,000 people working for you. You can fire them all. I mean, like really weird, kind of very outlier stuff. But executives got a very big message around, their YOLO is FOMO, which is, if I don't do this, my competitors will, and I will not stay, competitive with them. I will not be able to keep, moving forward and increase profitability at the organization. So there was a lot of adoption. There were even, I think it was AWS specifically said to employees a couple years ago, you need to write into your goals, your OKRs, whatever they call them, how you're going to use AI to make you better in your job. So there's a lot of executives saying, adopt, 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 and everybody went out and adopted. So yay us. We all went out and did the adoption, and now I think we're finding. So I don't think that there's like this hype cycle of AI doesn't work. It's not like, I mean, AI works the way it's, the ChatGPT, Claude, they work the way that they work. It's just the hype was that it was somehow magical, and it could replace all humans in some organizations. So things that really weren't very realistic. So I think, we all went out and adopted. We're sort of figuring out what it does and what it does well, what it doesn't do well. We're figuring out the use cases. And there are different use cases that at different risk levels and impact levels to organizations, and organizations are starting to find out things that are, related to even how much it costs to run it. Is that really making us more efficient? And of course, the thing that matters most to us in cyber, have we exposed private information somehow because agentic is now connected? You can get something coming in a public channel that's untrusted, that's not vetted, and it goes into the agent, and the agent's now pulling, secure, confidential data and just shipping it out. So I think that what's going on now is I don't think we're in like a trough of despair and like, oh, AI just doesn't work. I think what we are is we're getting realistic about what it can do, what it can't do, and what the risks are related, both financial and data and IT related to using it, and starting to put controls around it. So I think we've gone from it's going to see if it's going to do everything for everybody to realistic adoption and expansion of that adoption. Because like I said at the beginning up top, I don't think we've even figured out all the use cases we're going to use AI for in the long run.
But yeah, I was thinking about this the other day, talking to somebody about strong auth, right? You go to these like hyper advanced AI models, and it's like, let me text you a code. And there's like an Onion article the other day. It was like America is now spending 80% of their day typing in 6-digit codes,
Right.
for their phones. And it's like, well, it's AI. It should know it's me, right? And so like rethinking everything, I think makes sense to me. Um, but I do feel like there's a little bit of cognitive dissonance with the models, with the LLMs versus like day-to-day AI, right? Because I think people seem very comfortable putting incredibly confidential thing in the models, right? Like Claude Project, attach next quarter's financials and ask questions all the time, right? Do you think that sort of extends to the rest of us, or do you think that's like a model specific thing? Like, are they in a relationship with Claude and they're fine dumping data, but then when it comes to like my little startup, they don't want to give me their log data? Like, how do you see that right now? Because I think that's very interesting.
Well, I mean, there's been interesting research too. Is that part of it is the anthropomorphism of the LLM, so that we start to feel like I can trust you. Claude's my friend. ChatGPT's my friend. So yeah, people are putting confidential data in unless there's some sort of a control in the organization, and or they've been told not to do it. Right? Some people have
Sure.
controls of the company, and then we're also putting a lot of just confidential personal information into these models too. People are having, conversations with them. I mean, because they make you feel better. They're kind of trained to, in general, be positive and give you feedback. So people are saying, and you could say there's a personal risk, but there's also, if I'm having trouble with my boss, here's what happened. My boss did blah blah blah. You think about the amount of private information about a company or a customer that could, or this customer made me angry. What did I do? So yeah, I think there's a ton that people are putting in there, and I think it is in large part because it feels like we're having a human conversation with them, and not to mention the confused pilot issues, the indirect prompt injection that's exfiltrating private data. There's also just people just putting confidential data into these systems.
I mean, at a unbelievable scale, right? Like, and
Yeah.
somewhat as a cybersecurity person, I have a bit of a problem with the labs because they stole all the data to begin with. Like, it wasn't their data, right? Like, they went out and ate the internet and stole, borrow, whatever you want to call it, to train their models, and still do. And there was a hubbub the other day about one of the CRM companies being like, well, when you upload customer data about your pipeline, it now belongs to the model and we can ship it to other people. And it's like, when that blew up in their face, and the CEO had to do a big I think it was HubSpot, had to do a big mea culpa. And it's like, they just don't seem to get the credit that the models get, right? Like the actual labs get, as far as like the carelessness of data. And so, I'm curious, being at the sort of cutting edge of AI, I don't know if you saw, there was a big law firm here in Chicago that looked at Harvey and basically said, there's no competitive advantage to using this. Like, if we go to court against another law firm and they're using Harvey, we're using Harvey, we're going to get the same answers. So now we're going to spend $500 million building our own AI. which if you know lawyers is like insane because they're the cheapest people on the planet as far as like
Yeah,
IT,
I know.
right?
That's
And
yeah,
so you're like, wow, $500 million. But
yeah.
I think at their core, and maybe instinctively they know this because they're lawyers and they fight IP cases. Are we gonna? You think we end up in a place where every company has a model? Like, is that ultimately where? Because like right now we're all borrowing theirs, but like, do ExxonMobil and BP really want to use the same model to find oil? Like, it seems like a comparative problem or a competitive problem. Like, what do you feel about that? Do you feel people are going to start building their own?
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation in a couple of ways because the frontier models, so the Geminis, Copilots, ChatGPT, Claude, so the frontier models, they are controlled by the owners of by the labs. They're controlled by Anthropic and Microsoft and OpenAI. That means that they control what data is in there. So they can pick and choose, I mean, they right now are incentivized to have all the data in the sense that people want very comprehensive, but they can control what data is in those models. So by using them, we're kind of allowing them to control the information that we have. And then to your point, if I'm using the same frontier model as my competitor is using, well, maybe my prompts are a little better, but really we're kind of getting the same access. So, is one of us. So there's that piece of why maybe not frontier models. There's also just like that control of the data, being able to tune the model to exactly what you wanted. If you're the law firm, for example, you might not. I mean, lawyers are interesting and they do kind of find analogies from, I'm going to quote Shakespeare here, and, pull in this interesting data for point from history. But, you might really just want case law, for example, and just case law related to the kind of law that maybe your firm specializes in. So you could make it less likely to hallucinate and make it more finely tuned to your needs at your firm. So there's that. There's also, again, you can control the data that's in there so that if somebody wants to eliminate some piece of information, like Tiananmen Square never existed. Well, nope, you trained that model. So I do think that there are drives to people training their own models, which would be actually what we've seen for the past 20 years. Pre-Transformers, pre-Frontier Lab models, most organizations downloaded a model or even created their own model, trained it with their own data, fine-tuned it, made sure it was, purpose fit. I mean, machine learning flows have been and pipelines have been in use for decades in some pretty high stress situations like financial service,
Mhm.
quantitative, robo-advisor type stuff, because the models at Defender, had a lot of machine learning models. So that was actually something that was being done in the classic machine learning world prior to the NLP post transformers chatbots that were used to as the frontier models, or as part of the frontier model, part of the labs, part of what they offer, right? Because Claude has software around it; it's not just the model. Which we know now because we have model agility even with our frontier labs. You
Yeah,
want a
we
cheaper,
switch
you
all
want
the time.
Sonnet? That's fine. You don't need
All
T
right.
stable. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think that it's possible people might start bringing their own models. Maybe they're going to work with the frontier labs and sort of partially tune a model. And I do think you have a really good point about if everybody's using the same model, then we're not necessarily going to get a competitive differentiation other than through our prompts and the business logic we wrap around it. So they might want a model that's more tuned to them.
Right. And the other part you mentioned earlier is just cost of these tokens, right? So like, you know, we are absolutely in this subsidization version of AI right now, right? So it's like the analogy I use is like Uber. When Uber started, those rides didn't cost what you were paying. Uber was
Right.
subsidizing them, right? And then they sort of get you
Right.
hooked on the drug. They take the subsidy away, and then you're like, why is this Uber X $50 now instead of $2? But like, I feel like that's kind of happening with AI. But like, the actual raw cost of some of this stuff is pretty dumb to do in the cutting edge models. Like, you don't really need the most advanced stuff ever to parse a log. Like, that seems wasteful and probably really expensive. So, cost is going
Yeah.
to be a part of this too for me. And
I
so
think
that
so,
leads
and I
sort of,
think model agility. I mean, they're even within. I think that's why the labs are giving us the options because I sort of test that all the time. I'm like, let me run this through the older model or the cheap or the instant, whatever, and then let me run this through the latest and greatest and see what the difference is. And to your point, there's a lot of stuff that use the cheaper model. So I think we will see a lot more of that
Yeah,
to
and I
keep
think
costs down.
we haven't got to the point yet where we have build and run, right? Like I understand using Claude Code to build, like makes sense. It's expensive, but you're getting like outrageously good software output. Do you really need that for like document processing? Like you should
Mm.
probably just make it a runtime thing you build yourself. And so the interesting thing for me about that is like, where does that put security, right? Like, do we have a new generation of people who sort of manage their company's individual AIs, right? So if you think about like, oh, I work at this pharmaceutical, my job is primarily protecting the AI. Like that's what I do now, right? And so architecturally, it feels like maybe where we're headed. Who the hell knows? But like, I just have a hard time picturing everybody in the planet using three companies for their work. Like, it doesn't seem possible to me. Like, we're
Well,
gonna
I
have
mean,
sprawl.
a lot of us use three clouds. Um, a lot of companies use three clouds or four clouds, even if you start counting like DigitalOcean. So there was the thinking that it would be everybody would kind of just set in one cloud, but that didn't. Um, so I think it's possible that there are multiple. I mean, certainly at my previous company, at this company, multiple AIs in use, even from the frontier labs. Um, so yeah, I think I think that might continue to be the case. It is going to be interesting though to see what the overall cost is, because at some point, to your point, like there's been some subsidization, and the counter argument to there it's going to be this massive bill at some point is that we're getting much better at having very efficient models. The hardware's getting better at running the model. So, quote, the cost is going to come down. But yeah, if the cost doesn't come down at this point, I mean, you look at the what was reported about OpenAI, their gross versus their net based on how much they spend, and they're losing money from
Oh
all
yeah,
reports. I mean, right?
burning money.
Yeah, burning money.
Yeah.
But it's worth it for the future, not just to get us used to it, but also that then there's that thinking: will it actually go down and become that much cheaper?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I know like Meta just stepped in the last couple days and was like, "Hey, ours is a quarter of the cost of everybody else's." But how much of that is like mega subsidy of like we have to get our brand out there and not lose the AI war, so we're going to go really
Right,
low.
right.
Which again
Land grab.
benefits us as
Yeah,
builders. Like I
yeah,
like cheap
yeah,
AI, cheap tokens, but like it's not sustainable way to build a business, right? Like
yeah.
if you're counting on this 5 years from now, you might have some problems. So, kind of taking it more into our world, right? Like, you're a CISO at a startup. So you're responsible for security, but I'm assuming you also talk to a bunch of customers about security. Um, where do you
Yeah.
feel like their fears are the most? Like the people that you talk to that are at, Fortune 500s or other startups, like what are you sort of feeling like they're going like, oh, like, is it just the out of control bullet train or is it more specific than that?
I mean, I think that the biggest problem right now is still just trying to understand what AI is in terms of risk for the organization, how it's being adopted, where shadow AI is a massive, massive problem. Again, because the executives said, go out and adopt. And so everybody went out and adopted. And you've got AI adoption in so many different places. This isn't just like, SaaS adoption with like shadow IT, the classic cloud stuff. It's like people were buying SaaS. It's like, well, you get a CASB or a SASE and you're good. But people are adopting AI on their phones. They're adopting it locally. They're running their OpenClaw, instance. They're adopting it through SaaS that you may have approved that SaaS, but that SaaS vendor is now like, you can do stuff with agents. You've got AI here, so now you've got it embedded there, and that's like you're bringing in like fourth party risk with their sub processor, for example. And you've got also folks like just running out to Bedrock or whatever and starting to like run their own, in addition to adopting what we've got from and even the frontiers, right? You're using Claude. Well, that's one thing. You've also got Claude Cowork. You've also got Claude Code. Um, so I think that's the biggest concern with a lot of the CISOs is just that people have just been adopting this stuff, and now we've got to get a handle on what's out there, how are they using it, do we need to use it, what are we going to manage? And the other like really big hot button right now is what do we do about identity around agentic AI? Because agents are inheriting the permissions from the folks that use them. or like in the case of Claude Tag, Claude Anthropic's talking about having an identity for Claude in the channel itself. So you tag Claude in that Slack channel. Now it has its own set of permissions. So we've got this whole, we've really, and the beautiful thing about identity and access management is that everybody was completely 100% perfect with their identity and access control.
Yeah,
Right? No,
it's ideal,
right?
pristine,
Yeah,
everywhere.
we were all at perfection for no, I mean, this has been one of the biggest, most challenging parts of IT is just keeping access and, and identity and access under wraps, that whole thing, you snowball, you stay at a company, you just get more and more permissions, right? This is
Hmm.
still a reality. And now we're adding agents into it, and you can spawn 100 agents with different permission levels or with your permission levels. And then who knows, right? Somebody runs that agent. How am I supposed to audit this? So I think that's the other thing is that there's this real concern between how are people using it, what's going on with identity and audit around it, because I kind of don't know what's here. And also, I do not have control of the identity. And then the last piece is sort of us as the defender side, because, those are more operational. It's like, what am I doing with my company, my people, how they're using this? But then there's also there's this other component, the defender side, which is, the whole mythos part of it, which is now now AI is helping to lower the cost of doing business for attackers that are coming at us. And back to something we said earlier, they're exposing attack paths through the organization that weren't necessarily seen easily before. And a lot of them it comes down to hygiene, that up until now, nobody was happening to, it was too expensive to keep poking at all of the potential holes at a company. But now that you can automate it with AI, we're finding that attackers. And so that's raising the bar on our traditional hygiene and our traditional security legacy debt. So those are the three things I hear the most.
Looking at the threat side, so I deal more with the threat side of the world, detection engineering, catching bad guys. Like the insider threat, identity stuff is not as much my world. Although I do feel like identity is like drowning and I'm throwing them an anvil. I'm like, oh, you guys are already doing a really hard job really badly. And here's more, here's weight and now you're going to drown. Right. So I do feel bad about that. But like
Yeah.
at the end of the day, right, if you're thinking about adversarial security, like bad guys getting in, I
Yeah.
don't know how much they need to use AI. Like we're just publishing crap left and right. Like why burn the tokens? Just find rogue IT everywhere and, open projects and weird GPT. Like you want to see crazy stuff? Go look at the OpenAI GPT stuff. Like people are
Yeah.
just publishing apps with like company data in there. I'm like, oh, cool. Like you can just go ask questions of these guys' apps. So,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do feel like there's a recklessness in the business, but also they've had a gun put to their head saying use AI or get fired. So of
That's
course
right.
they're going to like, you're not going
Yeah.
to win that argument in security when your CFO's like, yeah, if you don't all, it's like when that weird period of time when you're like token maxing and there were leaderboards of who used the most tokens. And like, it was like, you're not going to stop that as security. This is these people's livelihoods. Right. And so, I am interested in that, but on the adversarial side, you know, I don't know that we have any good answers, right? Like I don't know what happens when people actually start finding bones with AI. Like it's so overwhelming, and like also who needs all these damn bones? Like I see the stuff from Anthropic and Mythos, and I'm like nobody needs this amount of crap. Like we already have enough phones in the world. We don't really need more.
Right. There's another,
So
yeah, vulnerability management also solved. I mean, no,
yeah,
like, and now,
sucked to begin
yeah,
with.
we've increased this. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you talk to people and, some CISO or some friend of yours, and they feel like they're drowning, right? Like it's so much going on. And what are the bad guys doing with AI? And what are my teams do? Like, where do you like put your advice hat on for a second? Like, what are you
Yeah. Yeah.
telling them? Like, what do they do? Where do you start? How do you
Yeah.
get better?
I mean, it's first take a deep breath, really, because I
Sure.
think it's too easy to get really buried under all these headlines and get really confused about what's what. Take a deep breath and go back to first principles. We can't manage what we don't know. So the first thing you need to understand is, how is AI being adopted and used in your organization? You're not going to be able to move forward without that, for two reasons. One, you can't manage what you don't know. But two, you need to know why people are adopting AI at the company, because the big why was somebody at high up said, adopt it now. But then You need to work with the business to understand why they're adopting what they're trying to do. Not everything should be done with AI. In some cases, AI is not the right answer. It's a non-deterministic system. It's going to give you a different answer every time. Sometimes you want a nice deterministic rule that's going to be very reliable and do exactly what you want. So you might want to talk to them about why they're doing it, what they're doing, what they're trying to accomplish. And then, you were saying, are they going to have multiple, labs, right? Hire from is it going to be as are we going to have Gemini and Copilot and ChatGPT? You could also start to understand what they're trying to do. That can help you to manage what they're adopting and how they're adopting. So first figure out what it is that you've got and why people are using it, because I don't think you're going to be able to go too forward strategically without at least having that baseline. And then once you know what people are literally, what's important for the business, what they're trying to do, and you've been able to kind of weed out maybe the things that and maybe we don't use AI for that. That's not AI is not a great fit here. Let's go back to what we had. That was cheaper and it was accurate, and now you're in an expensive, inaccurate space for what you were trying to accomplish. So once you get there, then I think you can start looking at really. I think of it as conceptual architectural trust boundaries and then control base architecture. So the conceptual boundary is what's upstream of the LLM, because the LLM's what's changed. There's software around it. Um, we know what software is. It's written in traditional, it's like Rust or Python or whatever. But there's software on the LLM. What's different? What's the new artifact? It's the model. It's the LLM. And that's driving the agent. I've heard people say, they think that like there's special AI code that the agent is made out of. And I'm like, there's non-deterministic code. I'm like,
It's just code.
it's the LLM. And I think, and I don't mean anything disrespectful to anybody that thought that. I think it's just an indication of how confusing this stuff is.
Right. Yeah.
But the LLM, right, has the context window. You put the stuff in the context window and, it turns into tokens and embedding space, right? And you get output after inference. That context window, the LLM can't differentiate trusted from untrusted data. And that's just how these systems are architected. So we've got trust boundaries prior to getting to the context window, like a retrieval boundary, a knowledge boundary, a memory boundary, where basically content can get contaminated going in there. And that's how a lot of these different attacks work. And then we've got downstream where the consequence, so it's contamination sort of upstream, consequence downstream, and that's the action, because the output of the LLM that could have been impacted by what went into the context window came out the other side. Came out the other side as an instruction to a piece of software that it's connected to, whether it's the harness that's around it or it's, your email or whatever, your CRM system. And that's the runtime. And when you start thinking that way, so now you've got conceptual trust boundaries, and we know that the LLM, it can't be trusted as a trust boundary. It's not deterministic. It's not going to give you trusted versus untrusted separation. Now, there's sort of this upstream and downstream, and in agentic, you keep looping around with this stuff. So it's not like it's linear. It's really more of a, once you understand that, now you can start saying as a CISO, well, where can I put in controls to limit the contamination, to separate my trusted from my untrusted, to get what goes into the context window to be as clean and as sorted as possible. And since that's not going to be perfect, you're never going to be able to get that entirely perfect. Looking at what comes out on the other side and parsing that, and also doing real-time runtime controls, and start architecturally, what can I use for runtime controls? Not like just a guardrail inside the LLM, but be able to literally stop an email from going out or stop data from exfiltrating. And now and if anybody, when I say this, a lot of people are like, hey, that sounds like security architecture. I'm like, because it is, but isn't this AI? Isn't AI measurement? It's not. We need to understand how LLMs work in the center of all this. But around it, it really is. And it means we do need some new controls. We do need some new tools, but we don't need to throw out what we've been doing all of our careers and has been working with varying, but, because oftentimes we don't get to do this properly, but which is understanding, before it goes in and putting controls around those trust boundary, those actual controls. And the controls can be, if we're talking about a RAG retrieval, who could touch the data in that? in that repository? Have I logged who had access to it? You go back to identity and access, like standard of like, in the memory, who was able to change the memory in the harness of this AI, right? We start putting it, in DLP for exfiltration, right? We can use that. It's not going to be perfect. There are other things we can do. We can stop runtime, stop from somebody from sending an email. But we know these controls. We just now need to understand how they go for the trust boundaries with an AI system. And in some cases, we need new controls or new solutions, like with identity. Identity, it's not human, it's not NHI entirely either. There's this weird, so we're going to need some new tooling too to do some of this, but we don't need to like completely rewrite how we do security. And I think that that's where CISOs can get caught up, because it's just, this is totally new. LLMs are new. Do not get me wrong. We have not had them before, but for the last few years. And we haven't allowed software to make decisions on its own before. This stuff is very new, and it's going real fast because you can spawn 100 agents in seconds. But the core of what we're doing in terms of securing it has to stay the same. It's just how we apply it has to be very, very different, because this stuff does move so fast, and we are now trusting outputs of software, which, it was always a human one way or
Right.
another. It was always a
Right.
human
Yeah.
before, and now we're really trusting the output of the software. So go back to first principles is really it, but be sure that you understand what's changed in AI, because as you apply those first principles, they have to be AI aware and AI.
Yeah. It's interesting to see people fight that, right? Where like just shut it down or don't allow it. And I'm like, that ain't gonna work at all. So I think we all
Oh,
have to adopt to this
yeah,
new world for sure. And
yeah, yeah.
somebody in the finance, exporting the last year's worth of transactions and putting in Claude and asking it questions, like they want that. Like it's helps them do their job. So saying no to even that is very, very difficult these days. So, I think you do see a generation of companies that are like, well, we're going to have corporate AI, like the approved path. You can upload
Right.
documents to it. It'll give you
That's right.
answers. I mean, it's kind of what I guess what they're trying to do with Copilot. I don't really know what they're trying to do with Copilot, but just I do see that in some of the more advanced shops, where it's like, we're going to do a big deal with OpenAI and have our approved OpenAI instance that has our corporate
That's
data
right.
in it, which is kind of first step towards like our own AI. Like I know like Netflix does this. Netflix has their own AI that has like all the Netflix data in it in the model. We can't see it, but they can see it, right? So it's an advantage to them, I don't know, write scripts or whatever the hell Netflix is doing with their AI. Um, understanding subscribers is probably what they're doing. So,
Well, they've been
in that,
using machine learning models to understand with, algorithms to figure out what we'll like and what we won't for
yeah,
years. Yeah, I mean,
they're
that's why
very
they
good at it.
recommend, we think you'd like this. They've been using that since well before ChatGPT and Transformers.
Right. So they're, obviously they're an extreme case of like really understanding what they're trying to do and taking existing strategy and putting an AI to supercharge it. Like they're probably one of the better examples of like somebody who's probably killing it with AI, versus some, mid-tier insurance company that had kind of broken processes to start with. It's like, don't load that in AI. It's just going to get worse.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. When they automate, yeah, broken system, yeah, that's yeah, not ideal.
I think there is a little bit of a fear of AI just making the bigger guys bigger. Like I do worry
Mm,
about that from an IT perspective of like most of these dramatic changes in our lives have resulted in a new crop of sort of voices, right? So whether it's mobile, Apple sort of rising back to the forefront, which I love them because they respect privacy, or like, hell, that Amazon come. You never had an IT conversation about Amazon, and all of a sudden they're the biggest player in IT because of AWS. So like, but like, I do worry. It just Google, Microsoft win, Netflix wins. Like there isn't a lot of oxygen left in the room for startups, and this is a fear in security because you build a company that does AppSec and the models just crush you in an instant because they launch some feature that kills you. So, the security from the models themselves is terrifying a lot of startups right now. I don't know if that's something you worry about too much in your day job, but like a lot of us who are working with startups are like, yeah, I'm building this sidecar for developers to code better. And it's like, well, it's a feature flag inside of OpenAI or Claude Code and you're out of business, right?
yeah.
So where do you think we fit in this? Like startups and security companies? Is it, Are you worried about the model sort of taking our lunch, or do you think we'll be okay?
Well, if we go to cloud and we look at the cloud paradigm, right? There was a huge amount of security that was built into all of the major clouds, and they needed to. GCP had its own security, AWS had its own security, Azure has its own security. And great reporting tools and all of them. And then there's Wiz. Right. And Wiz became this multi-billion-dollar juggernaut because a lot of people had multiple clouds. I had at my last company, I had stuff in each one of the clouds. And even though AWS was our main cloud at the time, I had to be able to report out and normalize what was happening across my entire estate, which included the other two major clouds. So just their security tools didn't give me all of what I needed to know. And then if I needed to do an incident check, I could either go into each individual tool or use something like Wiz, right? And you could go into all. So I think that we're going to see a similar paradigm here with the frontier models, which is that they're all going to have to build some security in because they need security and customers are going to ask for some controls. But I don't think that it's going to eliminate security for outside of the model, because for two reasons. One is the model only has has security controls that are related to the model and the harness around it. They don't know what's going on in your data repository, which matters. They don't know what people are saying into the memory that may or may not make sense, right? They don't know what your rules are always in terms of execution at runtime. So there's that. There's also that you're going to be using multiple different models through either from the frontier folks, from your SaaS providers, and you need to have a solution that's going to be able to look across all of those and give you a control plane that's normalized and able to give you reporting out for audit and compliance and forensic investigation that gives you kind of one way to look at across everything. So I think, yes, they absolutely are going to have additional security. Some startups, maybe that they were writing one thing for Claude and maybe Claude does it or Anthropic does it. That could be that startup is out of business. But I do think that doesn't mean that there's going to be a need for platform-based AI security, just as we need, platform-based security across clouds and across our own networks.
Yeah, we all made money for 25 years by Microsoft screwing up, right? Like that's why we exist in security in a lot of ways because the big guys can't be everything to everybody. And so I do believe that also. I do worry about the gravity, which is bigger than it's ever been for like the same 8 companies to win all the time. And I guess what I'd be interested in transitioning to a little bit from that is the people side of it, right? So I think for me, part of it is like there's this aspirational and across income levels, gender, whatever, like AI sort of levels the playing field. Like anybody can build a startup. You don't need to have gone to MIT to know how to do AI ML anymore. Like you could just use Claude, right? Like there was a period where whenever somebody said MLM, you're like, oh, I'm not a data scientist. Like I don't know what that
Right.
is.
Yeah.
And now everybody can go to AI and build an agent. So, uh, but the dark side of that coin is, all the gravity continues to go to the model companies and they're worth trillions and trillions of dollars. And yeah, it's great if you work at Anthropic, but if you're a regular person who isn't AI friendly, you're going to get crushed out of the market. How do you feel about that part of it? Like the people side of it? Do you feel like it's, obviously there's nobody can predict the future, but today it feels like there's more opportunity than there's ever been to create something amazing. And at the same time, I've never seen a more depressing LinkedIn feed in my entire just
Mm,
layoffs and despair and I don't know and fear. Really smart people that I trust are like AI slop and leave me alone. And then like, we could get into sales and marketing too, but just in general, like how are you balancing that in your head? Like equality and opportunity versus like big tech oppression. Like where are you at with that?
yeah. I'm not sure that the reason that we're saying, I mean, you're making 2 points here, right? One is that if the frontier models can only be put out by frontier labs, at this point, if somebody wanted to come along and compete with Anthropic or with Google Gemini, the size of the check that they would need to be able to stand that up is incredibly high, which is interesting. And what do? We right now we actually have a lot of competition. We haven't even talked about Meta, but Meta's trying to get back in the game again and again. They made some great hires. There's Grok, which I guess they're just selling
SpaceX.
their yes, SpaceX, they're
Yeah.
selling their unused, data
Hmm.
center, like,
Yeah.
horsepower to Anthropic now because I guess Grok isn't being used. But so, I mean, there's a limited number, but there's actually quite a when you think about, I mean, where are we with the airlines right now in the United States? I mean, we're kinda like, closing down on 3.
Right.
So there's that. But then there's this other piece that you're talking about, which is that high tech has undergone a massive change in the last year. And there have been tons and tons of layoffs, and not just high tech. There have been other industries, but high tech I'm sort of closer to, and I think that it's probably a little bit more salient for this conversation. But I know it's impacted other sectors as well. But in part because there was this belief, well, we can replace all the developers with AI. We can replace, anybody who's doing something sort of little, all the SOC analysts, right? Tier 1 SOC analysts gone. Um, so there was that thinking is at least what we've had as the explanation. But I think when you kind of dig in a little bit more, I think companies have just been going back through and trying to assess who they've got working for them, what those people are doing, what they're spending money on. They're trying to tighten their belt a little bit for some economic reasons and also to get investment in AI, which they believe is going to be really important for staying competitive in the future. So I think that what we're seeing is just a big change in terms of how jobs are done at tech companies and other sectors, and we're going to see a rebalancing in the long run. I think right now we're seeing a lot of jobs change, and people who were trained to do one thing and did one thing very well in sort of a narrow space, that job may have disappeared. I opened a job rec last year when I was at Protect AI, and for somebody on my team, when I put it out there, I got about 1,000 resumes almost immediately. They all had the same background. They were all, tier 1 SOC analysts. That it was creepy. It was like it was almost exactly the same resume. It was almost like I was like, did a robot make all 1,000
Right.
of these? But they were all individuals. None of them were actually qualified for the particular job I had posted. But I could see that this job, that these people with this resume that was perfectly fit to the job that they were in, it must have been that a lot of them were out of work because I had this just massive influx of the same resume. And I think that's what we're seeing is we're seeing there were a lot of jobs that people trained for, and we thought were going to be really good jobs in the future, but they may be disappearing. But I don't know if that means all of the high tech jobs are disappearing. I think it's more that what's happening is we're seeing a rejiggering. Some jobs, yes, we thought we'd need 1,000 of them. It turns out we only needed 2 or something, because we have AI assistants. But I don't think that high tech's going away as a job. I think we're just going through a period of sort of rebalancing who's working where, and some people are going to have to go and reskill and retrain, and some people may decide I don't want to be in IT anymore. So I think that it's not going to be as horrible in the next few years. But I think right now, yeah, it has been. Unfortunately, a lot of people got really caught out that there was this big turn and shift coming, and they were trained to do one thing, and that thing is now it's not what's being hired for anymore. Which is I feel it too. It's heartbreaking. I get LinkedIn folks, reaching out to me in LinkedIn all the time, and it just it's very, very heartbreaking for a lot of people right now because there are many people that have lost their jobs.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, some of the advice that you would give to people, like, obviously, I get a ton of that on my stuff too. It's like, how do I get into cyber? Or I'm in cyber and I'm stuck or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you would sort of
Yeah.
give this, I guess, standard response of like, find, network, which is always like a really hard piece of advice to give because, like, so somebody accepts a LinkedIn connection, who cares, right? But then it's like, well, publish a blog or contribute to an open source project. And the other day I was talking to somebody on this podcast about like even that is so AI now. Like it's like you can't like you write an article and everybody's like, oh, it's just AI slop. They're not even reading it anymore, right? Attention is like so difficult. So I don't even necessarily know what to tell a 23-year-old that wants to get into cyber anymore. I go every year and do like a thing at DePaul here in Chicago, and I room full of kids that are like, "How do I get into cyber?" And 12, 15 years ago, it was like, apply, you'll get a job. Like, it was so easy, right? It was to get
Yeah,
a
yeah.
job. And
Learn
now
help
it's like,
desk. Learn, yeah.
yeah, you're one of these 1,000 applicants. And unfortunately, some of those applicants are from Google and Microsoft now. And the gravity of that is like people are going to interview them first. Like, it just, the way the world works is they want that pedigree. So like, it is as hard as it's ever been. And so I do worry about access. I do worry about sort of that pull the ladder up behind us in security, because like, yeah, in 10 years, are we going to have any youth in our industry? Are we going to have any diversity in our industry? Or is it
Right.
just us? Like, we're going to do the boomer thing where we're like, you don't get to come along on this financial reward. Like, we're going to take it all.
I don't think it's going to be just us because, in high tech, right, the older you get, the more expensive you are. And since the technology does, some things stay the same. I mean, honestly, I know people that don't know what TPP is, and I'm just like, come on, learn it. But I mean, like a lot of what you need to know cycles very, very quickly, and so it's you hire somebody younger, cheaper. So we're always aging out in IT. If I was younger, I would focus on though. I would make sure that you understand how AI works, how to secure AI, how the attackers are using AI. I mean, at this point, I think the best advice we can give people is to make sure that you're very AI fluent, because that is where the companies are hiring right now. Who knows what's going to be in 3 to 5 years, but for now, and that's always been a piece of advice, is always try and stay sort of ahead with your skill set. I think what happened, unfortunately, was that the skill set turned so quickly for a lot of people that like they were trying to stay ahead, but it was such a hard pivot. But, in general, yeah, now I would say make sure that you're AI fluent, because that is gonna be critical for at least the next 6 months to 12 months.
Yeah. It's interesting because the other side of our industry, right, which is more of the sales, marketing, like growth side of our industry versus the technical guys, like there's a new generation of folks that came up in that world that were like very good at social, like video, like they knew how
Yes.
to do that. And then
Yeah.
the older folks were like, I don't know, this crazy, posting idea or whatever. And then you watched a generation of people sort of learn it, right? The older,
Right.
people got better at social, better at podcasting or whatever it is.
I
And then
resisted it.
I was like, this is a waste of time. Like, I don't know, like,
Yeah.
do I really need it? And then I realized that this is actually more interesting than just talking to one person at a time. But yeah, so, that side of it, it's interesting because, looking at what you're doing, so I've been a field CISO for a long time, right? And I just get overwhelmed with inbound, and you must be a million X times that because you're sort of famous CISO, right? You're going to get like a lot of inbound. Like, how are you dealing with that side of the world of like people who want things from you, whether it's, they want you to look at their product or they want you, obviously job advice is always a thing, but like at an industry level, are you just out? Are you just like, stop pinging me with shit? Or are you still engaged in that? Like, how do you find out about new things in your role? Like, are you open to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I can tell you on LinkedIn, if somebody's trying to sell me something, I apologize. I don't have the time. If you want me to look at your company, for the most part, I also apologize. I don't have the time. Most of the time, booked for podcasts. I do try and be a little bit more open when people are looking for a job, especially if somebody is a member of an organization I'm a part of, because that's part of my role. Like Cyber Future Foundation, for example, or WESIS or EWF. If you're already a member of the community, I do try and make space for those folks that reach out. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, there's only so much time, which is why, yeah, if you're trying to sell me something on LinkedIn, I am sorry, but it's, yeah, I hope
Yeah.
you didn't like use like burn one of your like intros or something. Cause like, I can't keep up. It's the same with like email. People cold email. People have started, I don't know if they're doing this too, but they like cold put something on your calendar. It's like an invite and then it like appears, there's this phantom on your end. Like sometimes I see that and I'm like, what is this? And I'm like, block.
The
Don't do that to me.
worst go to market motion I can imagine,
Yeah.
other than somebody at one point, like called my wife's cell phone or something trying to find me. It's just like desperation. And you're like, all right, I get it because you're desperate. But like the cold calendar invite and the cell phone call to people that might know you are the two worst things, I think. But it's also
Heard of
like
that. That hasn't happened to me, but I have heard
it
from
does
some
happen.
others
Yeah.
about the cold, yeah, the email, the call to like your spouse or to your
Right.
to somebody's sister, apparently, where I'm like, holy smokes! I mean,
Yeah.
everybody, like, I know you got to sell, but like,
Well, the data
have some
brokers combine
boundaries.
everything. Yeah, yeah, boundaries are good. Yeah, so but in your role, like, as CISO of a startup, I'm assuming you also talk to customers. I mean, I'm not gonna say you do, but is
I
that
do.
something that's
Yeah,
part
no,
of
I
your job?
absolutely do.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So, that's, uh, I guess part of the, I guess, way to get access to is go through Noma or go through whatever and get access to smart people. And I do feel like there's been a big jump into vendor land for a lot of really smart folks. So I do feel like there's access to people that are CISOs at, Google or Noma or wherever that you can sort of look to for advice if you're another CISO or somebody who has a
yeah,
director of security role. The CISO community has always been a little like closed, but also like you talk to each other a lot, right? Like that's kind of how
yeah,
CISOs are.
yeah.
And then every salesperson I meet is always like, how do I get in that community? And I'm like, you can't. And then they always want to use you to, can you intro me to these 5 people? And you're like,
Oh,
no, I
yeah.
can't. You got to get sick of that request too, I'm sure. Um, it's my least favorite request. So, in that sense, though, because we're coming up on time, I would love to hear, like you mentioned some of the foundation stuff you work with, everything like that. Is there anything that people can connect with you on, or should they join these different organizations? Like, give me a little bit of what do you want to promote? Like, what are you into right now? You can promote Noma or promote your other associations. I'd love to hear what you're up to.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, obviously, Noma, we're agentic AI security. So, if you're using agentic AI, at least you need some security. So, come look at
Take a
ours.
peek.
I think it's
It's
the
good stuff.
best. That's why
Yeah.
I'm here. Um, but yeah, of things I'm involved with, if you're an OWASP person, there's the Gen AI security project. I'm one of the co-founders of the AI VSS for security scoring of AI vulnerabilities. But there's a ton of amazing projects going on at OWASP. CSA has a CSAI project there where they've got some work. I'm actually a co-chair of the agentic runtime group there. And that, but there's a lot of different things that are going on at Cloud Security Alliance for AI specifically. So that's another really great way to get involved and help us create standards and advice and guidance. And then also the AIUC, which is sort of a SOC 2 for compliance checks for agentic and AI. Which we really do need. We need to start getting controls and be able to check controls. So the AIUC is another organization that I think is doing really great work. I'm also involved in that. And I urge anybody who wants to get closer to some of the standards work and the compliance work that's going on around AI to take a look at any or all of those organizations, AIUC, uh, a CSA AI and a WASP Gen AI project. And then, of course, there's got a shout out for my OG organizations, the Executive Women's Forum.
Hmm.
It's really fantastic if you're a security leader. Great way to do people. You were talking about it's hard to do networking. That's what EWF does, just incredibly brilliantly, and great leadership skills. Because one of the ways to, I think, stay relevant is to make sure that you're a great leader in addition to a great technician. And then WeSys Women in Cybersecurity is another fantastic organization that I am a part of, and it's another way and our mission is to recruit, retain, and advance women in cybersecurity. It's open to all men and women, and it's just a really great community and way to stay in touch with people who are making a difference.
I do not know where you find the time. That's incredible list of things to be participating in. All amazing. And I'm a big fan of telling people like, you know, uh, give value, right? Like if you want to network, like give value, like a
Yeah,
wasp, like most of
yeah,
the time these organizations will take free help if you're willing to help, right? Let me
that's right.
proofread something, let me contribute something, let me join one of
Volunteers
these
needed.
webinars and learn.
Yeah.
Like there's so many opportunities. And unfortunately, as you know, a lot of these things don't have the money behind them that a big startup does. So they get lost in the noise. But those are incredibly good organizations to be a part of. Um, just real quick, AICU, what is that? I haven't heard that one before.
AIUC.
AIUC, what's that? And where do
AIUC,
we
that's
find
the
it?
one that's doing SOC 2 compliance, sort of an equivalent for agentic and AI. So it's controls around AI. And there's
And
a
it's a
standard
organization,
AIUC
like a
one.
standards organization?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, very
AIUC.
cool.
Yeah,
See, you learn something new every day. I did not know that existed. That sounds very cool. I've known Cloud Security Alliance since it started, and those guys, and certainly,
yeah,
some of the other stuff you do. But that's a new one to me. So that's amazing. Obviously, people can follow you on LinkedIn and go to your
yes,
bio. All these orgs are
for
there.
sure.
I'm
Yeah.
incredibly grateful for you to taking an
Oh,
hour with us today. You are a
thank you.
wealth of experience for all of us, and a great place to sort of learn how to exist in this new crossroads of AI and security. So thank you so much. I'll keep
Thank you.
following you and looking forward to all your content that you put out.
Thank you.
Thanks.